The USS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace like a mountain appearing from thin air. The massive human battleship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its dark hull gleaming under the light of the alien sun. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the viewscreen display the Krellian home system for the first time. Captain Lisa Turner sat in the command chair, her eyes fixed on the tactical display showing dozens of alien vessels scattered throughout the system. The Krellian ships looked like predators made of metal and energy, their sleek hulls designed for speed and destruction. Each one was easily half the size of the Defiance, but there were so many of them that they filled the space around the planet. Like a swarm of angry insects. Lieutenant Amy Collins turned from her communications station, her face pale with concern. The alien chatter was coming through on every frequency, voices speaking in harsh, clicking sounds that made her skin crawl. The ship's computer was working overtime trying to decode the language, but so far it had only managed to translate a few basic words like danger, unknown, and massive. The bridge crew worked quietly around them, each person focused on their duties while trying not to show how nervous they felt. This was humanity's first contact with the Krellian Empire, and nobody knew what to expect. The aliens had been nothing more than rumors and scattered reports until 3 weeks ago, when everything changed. Engineer Ben Parker checked his displays from the engineering station, watching the quantum reactor that powered their ship. The new technology was still experimental, but it gave them more power than any human vessel had ever possessed. The reactor hummed quietly in the depths of the ship, generating enough energy to power a small city while barely working at quarter capacity. Dr. Kate Sullivan stood near the medical station, her hands steady despite the tension in the air. She had prepared the medical bay for potential casualties, though she hoped they would not be needed. The doctor had treated injuries from mining accidents and space debris, but she had never dealt with wounds from alien weapons. Security Chief Tony Rodriguez monitored the weapon systems from his station, his fingers dancing across the controls as he ran diagnostic checks. The ship's armaments were far beyond anything Earth had built before, designed specifically for this mission into unknown space. Every weapon was ready but not activated, waiting for the captain's orders. The reason for their presence in this hostile system lay in the records stored in the ship's computer. 3 weeks ago, the colony ship New Horizon had been exploring the Outer Rim territories when it was attacked by unknown assailants. The ship had been destroyed, but several life pods had escaped the carnage. The survivors who made it back to human space told a terrifying story. They described reptilian beings with scales like armor and eyes that glowed with predatory intelligence. The aliens had captured most of the colonists before destroying the ship, taking them away to an unknown destination. The few who escaped had only survived because they were in the outer sections when the attack began. Intelligence analysts had worked around the clock to identify the attackers, cross-referencing the survivors' descriptions with every known alien species in their databases. The match had been almost perfect. The Krellians were a warrior race that controlled a significant portion of this sector, known for their aggressive expansion and treatment of conquered peoples. Navigation Officer Julie Adams studied her star charts, comparing their current position with the intelligence reports about Krellian territory. They were deep in enemy space now, surrounded by hostile forces with no backup coming. The nearest human fleet was weeks away, and even then it would be smaller than the force they were facing. Communications Officer Sam Martinez worked frantically to establish some kind of translation protocol with the alien vessels. The Krellians were broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but their language was unlike anything in human databases. The universal translation programs that worked well with other species seemed completely unable to handle Krellian speech patterns. Weapons. Officer Chris Johnson kept his eyes on the tactical display, watching as more alien ships appeared on the sensors. The Krellians were moving into defensive positions around their homeworld, but their formations seemed disorganized and confused. It was as if they had never encountered anything like the Defiance before. Science Officer Dr. Alex Stone analyzed the energy readings from the alien vessels, comparing their technology to human standards. The results were surprising and somewhat disturbing. The Krellian ships were advanced, but not beyond human understanding. Their weapons and shields operated on principles that human scientists had mastered decades ago. Captain Turner made her decision and stood up from the command chair. The crew looked to her for guidance, knowing that her next words would determine whether they were about to begin a rescue mission or start a war. She had spent years preparing for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of facing an entire alien empire. The Defiance held its position at the edge of the system, its presence alone enough to cause chaos among the Krellian forces. The human ship waited silently in the darkness of space, while two civilizations prepared to meet for the first time in what would become a moment that changed the galaxy forever. Admiral Vexstar stood in the command center of his flagship, staring at the tactical display that showed the impossible. The unknown vessel was massive beyond anything in their databases, easily 3 times the size of their largest dreadnought. Its hull was dark and angular, designed in a way that made no sense to Krellian military doctrine. The ship looked like it was built for one purpose only, and that purpose was war. Sub-Commander Krill approached his superior with trembling hands, carrying the latest sensor readings. The alien vessel's energy signature was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Their computers could not identify the power source, the weapon systems, or even the basic materials used in its construction. It was as if the ship had been built using completely different physics. The Krellian fleet had been caught completely off guard. They were used to dealing with the primitive vessels of conquered species, ships that used outdated technology and predictable designs. This new arrival was something else entirely, something that made their most advanced warships look like toys in comparison. Captain Turner stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the alien fleet scramble to form defensive positions. She could see the confusion in their movements, the way their ships hesitated before changing course. It was clear that the Krellians had never faced anything like her vessel before, and that gave her both hope and concern. Lieutenant Amy Collins worked frantically at her communications station, trying to establish contact with the alien forces. The universal translators were struggling with the Krellian language, managing to decode only fragments of their transmissions. What little they could understand sounded like panic and confusion mixed with military commands. The few words that came through clearly were not encouraging. The translators picked up references to invasion, destruction, and something that roughly translated to ancient enemy. The Krellians seemed to believe that the humans were part of some long-forgotten threat that had returned to destroy them. Engineer Ben Parker monitored the quantum reactor from his station, amazed by its smooth operation. The new power source was performing beyond all expectations, providing more energy than they could possibly use while running at barely 10% capacity. The reactor had been designed specifically for this mission, incorporating technology that pushed the boundaries of human ENGIN. Dr. Kate Sullivan prepared her medical bay for the worst possible outcome. She had studied what little information they had about Krellian physiology, learning that the reptilian aliens were tough and resilient. If fighting broke out, she would need to be ready to treat both human and alien casualties. Security Chief Tony Rodriguez kept his weapon systems ready but not activated. The ship's armaments were far beyond anything Earth had ever built, designed to face unknown threats in the depths of space. Every weapon was checked and double-checked, waiting for the captain's orders. The situation became more tense when the Krellians began broadcasting what seemed to be demands. Communications Officer San Martinez managed to piece together fragments of their transmissions, hearing words that sounded like surrender, leave, and territory. The aliens were clearly trying to establish dominance, but their messages were getting lost in translation. Admiral Vexstar made the decision to hail the unknown vessel directly. He activated the main communication array and began transmitting in the standard Krellian diplomatic language. His words were carefully chosen, mixing threats with offers of negotiation. He demanded to know who they were, where they came from, and what they wanted in Krellian space. Captain Turner received the alien transmission and listened as the ship's computer tried to translate it. The message was garbled and incomplete, but she could make out what seemed to be threats mixed with questions. The tone was aggressive and demanding. Clearly, coming from someone used to being obeyed without question, she decided to respond with a simple message of her own. Speaking slowly and clearly, she announced that they were representatives of humanity, seeking information about missing colonists. She explained that they came in peace but would defend themselves if threatened. Her words were calm and measured, designed to avoid escalation. The translation systems on both sides mangled the messages completely. What Captain Turner intended as a peaceful inquiry came across to the Krellians as a series of demands and threats. The aliens heard references to colonies, missing people, and defensive action, interpreting these as signs of an impending invasion. Sub-Commander Krill reported that more alien ships were detected on the edge of their sensor range. To the Krellians, it seemed like the massive vessel was just the first wave of an invasion force. They began sending urgent messages to all military installations, calling for immediate reinforcements and preparing for the largest battle in their history. Navigation. Officer Julie Adams plotted escape routes while monitoring the alien fleet's movements. The Krellians were positioning themselves for either a massive assault or a desperate defense, and she wanted to be ready for either possibility. Her calculations showed that they could retreat to hyperspace within minutes if necessary. The tension reached a breaking point when a nervous Krellian corvette fired a warning shot across the Defiance's bow. The energy beam struck the human ship's shields and disappeared without effect, absorbed by defensive systems that were far beyond Krellian understanding. The warning shot that was meant to show strength instead demonstrated their complete helplessness against the human vessel. Emperor Thakran received the urgent transmission in his palace on the capital world, his scaled hands gripping the armrests of his throne as he listened to the report. The message from Admiral Vextar was filled with panic and confusion, describing a vessel that defied all understanding of galactic military technology. The Emperor had ruled through fear and strength for 40 years, but this news shook him to his core. The unknown ship had absorbed their most powerful weapons without any visible damage. Its shields had not even flickered when struck by energy beams that could destroy a cruiser. The vessel simply sat there in space, silent and menacing, while their entire fleet scrambled around it like insects around a giant. Grand Admiral Zafax stood beside the throne, his military decorations gleaming in the artificial light. He had commanded fleets across a dozen star systems, crushing rebellions and conquering worlds with ruthless efficiency. But even he had never seen anything like the reports coming from the home system. The Emperor's communicator crackled with incoming messages from across the Empire. Military commanders were requesting orders, planetary governors were asking for reinforcements, and intelligence officers were demanding explanations. The news of the mysterious vessel was spreading faster than they could contain it. Captain Turner faced a difficult decision on the bridge of the Defiance. The longer they remained in the system, the more the situation deteriorated. She could see on the tactical display that more Krellian ships were arriving every hour, forming a massive fleet that surrounded their position. The aliens were clearly preparing for something big. Communications. Officer Sam Martinez finally managed to establish a basic translation protocol after hours of work. The ship's computer had analyzed thousands of Krellian transmissions, slowly, building a vocabulary that could handle simple concepts. It was far from perfect, but it was better than the complete confusion they had been dealing with. The first properly translated message from the Krellians was not encouraging. Admiral Vextar demanded to know why they had invaded Krellian space and what their intentions were toward the Empire. His words were harsh and threatening, making it clear that he saw the human ship as an enemy vessel. Navigator Julie Adams reported that the alien fleet now numbered in the hundreds, with more ships arriving from distant star systems. The Krellians were mobilizing their entire military force, creating the largest gathering of warships in recent history. The sight of so many enemy vessels would have terrified any normal crew, but the humans seemed strangely calm. Lieutenant Amy Collins monitored the alien communications, listening to the translated conversations between Krellian commanders. The Aliens were clearly afraid, though they tried to hide it behind military bravado. They spoke of unknown enemies, ancient threats, and the possibility that their empire was facing its greatest challenge. Engineer Ben Parker ran diagnostics on all ship systems, making sure they were ready for whatever came next. The quantum reactor was operating perfectly, providing unlimited power for weapons, shields, and life support. The ship's defensive systems were charged and ready, though they had not yet been tested against alien technology. Dr. Kate Sullivan studied the medical data they had gathered about Krellian physiology. The aliens were reptilian humanoids with tough scales and powerful muscles, evolved on a high-gravity world that made them naturally strong. They would be dangerous opponents in close combat, but their technology seemed to be their weakness. Security. Chief Tony Rodriguez analyzed the alien fleet's formation and tactics. The Krellians were using standard military doctrine, positioning their ships in defensive patterns that would work well against conventional enemies. But their tactics were predictable, and their technology appeared to be decades behind human standards. The breakthrough came when Science Officer Dr. Alex Stone completed his analysis of the alien vessels. The Krellian ships used fusion reactors and plasma weapons, technology that humans had mastered long ago. Their shields operated on electromagnetic principles that were well understood, and their armor was made from standard metallic alloys. Captain Turner realized that the technological gap between humans and Krellians was enormous. The aliens were not just outmatched, they were completely outclassed. The Defiance could probably destroy their entire fleet without taking any damage, but that would mean starting a war that nobody wanted, Weapons Officer Chris Johnson reported. That the Krellians were charging their weapons and preparing to attack. The alien fleet was moving into assault formation, with their largest ships taking position at the front. It seemed that diplomacy had failed, and the Krellians were preparing to fight. The situation became critical when Emperor Thakran sent a direct message to the human ship. The translation was rough but clear enough to understand. He accused them of being the vanguard of an invasion force and demanded that they leave Krellian space immediately. His tone was desperate, showing how much the appearance of the human ship had shaken his confidence. Admiral Vexstar received new orders from the Emperor, commands that made his blood run cold. If the unknown vessel did not retreat within 1 hour, he was to attack with everything he had. The Emperor would rather risk a battle they could not win than appear weak in front of his subjects. The news of the ultimatum spread through both fleets quickly. The Krellians prepared for a desperate battle against an enemy they did not understand, while the humans watched their enemies with growing concern. Captain Turner knew that once the shooting started, there would be no going back. The Krellian High Command gathered in the war room beneath the Imperial Palace, their faces grim as they studied the holographic displays showing the human vessel. Grand Admiral Zethak pointed at the tactical readouts with a clawed finger, his voice heavy with concern as he explained the situation to the assembled military leaders. The unknown ship had not moved for 6 hours, but its very presence was causing chaos throughout the Empire. Reports were coming in from border worlds where conquered species were beginning to whisper about the mysterious vessel that had appeared in their home system. The news was spreading faster than they could contain it. Emperor Thakran paced behind his commanders, his scaled skin reflecting the light from the holographic projectors. He had built his empire through conquest and intimidation, crushing anyone who dared to challenge Krellian authority. But this single alien ship threatened everything he had worked to achieve. Sub-Commander Krill brought the latest intelligence reports to his superiors, his hands shaking as he delivered the news. The alien vessel had not responded to any of their communications in the past hour, and their sensors showed no change in its energy output. It simply waited in space like a sleeping predator, ready to strike at any moment. The Emperor made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He authorized the use of their most devastating weapon, the Planet Killer missile. That had been developed in secret over the past decade. The weapon was designed to destroy entire worlds, and it had never been used in actual combat. On the bridge of the Defiance, Science Officer Dr. Alex Stone made a disturbing discovery as He analyzed the data they had collected about the Krellian Empire. The aliens had been systematically raiding human settlements for years, capturing colonists and using them as slave labor in their mining operations across the galaxy. The evidence was overwhelming and horrifying. The New Horizon had not been the first human ship to disappear in this region of space. Dr. Stone found records of at least a dozen other vessels that had vanished without a trace. Their crews and passengers never heard from again. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to capture humans for forced labor. Captain Turner studied the intelligence reports with growing anger. The Krellians had been committing acts of war against humanity for years, and Earth had not even known about it. The isolated human colonies on the frontier had been easy targets for alien slavers, too far from help to defend themselves effectively. Communications officer Sam Martinez intercepted more alien transmissions, and the translation software was finally working well enough to understand their content. The Krellians were discussing something called the Final Solution, a weapon that they believed could destroy any enemy vessel regardless of its size or defenses. Engineer Ben Parker monitored the quantum reactor as it continued to operate at minimal power levels. The advanced technology was still experimental, but it was proving to be far more efficient than anyone had expected. The reactor could power their ship for months without refueling, giving them options that no other vessel in the galaxy possessed. Dr. Kate Sullivan prepared the medical bay for the rescue operation that would surely follow. The intelligence report suggested that hundreds of human prisoners were being held on various worlds throughout the Krellian Empire, and many of them would need immediate medical attention when they were freed. Security Chief Tony Rodriguez reviewed the ship's defensive systems, making sure they were ready for whatever the aliens might throw at them. The Defiance had been built with the latest technology available to humanity, incorporating advances in materials science and energy manipulation that put it decades ahead of anything else in known space. Navigation, Officer Julie Adams plotted courses to several worlds mentioned in the intelligence reports, focusing on the prison facilities where human colonists were being held. The rescue mission had become much larger than anyone had anticipated, but they were the only human ship in this part of the galaxy. Lieutenant Amy Collins monitored the alien fleet as it continued to grow in size and organization. The Krellians were bringing in ships from across their empire, creating a massive armada that filled the space around their homeworld. The sight would have been impressive if not for the fact that their technology was so primitive. Weapons Officer Chris Johnson ran final checks on the ship's armament systems, though he hoped they would not be needed. The Defiance carried enough firepower to level a continent, but Captain Turner preferred to solve problems through negotiation when possible. The situation reached a new level of tension when the Krellians began moving a massive missile toward the front of their formation. The weapon was easily the size of a small cruiser, and its energy signature suggested it carried enough destructive power to crack a planet. The aliens were preparing to use their ultimate weapon against the human ship. Admiral Vextar received the final authorization from Emperor Thakran, along with orders that left no room for interpretation. He was to fire the planet-killer missile at the human vessel, and if that failed to destroy it, he was to ram it with his entire fleet. The Emperor would rather see his military destroyed than admit defeat to an unknown enemy. Captain Turner watched the alien preparations with calm interest, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of both civilizations. The Krellians were about to learn why humans were considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and the lesson would be one they would never forget. The planet-killer missile launched from the Krellian fleet with a blinding flash of light that could be seen across the entire star system. The massive weapon was twice the size of a normal ship, filled with enough antimatter to destroy a world and turn it into cosmic dust. Admiral Vextar watched from his command bridge as their ultimate weapon streaked toward the human vessel, hoping that it would finally end this nightmare. The missile moved through space at incredible speed, its engines burning with the fury of a small sun. Every Krellian ship in the fleet tracked its progress, their crews holding their breath as they waited to see if their most powerful weapon could destroy the mysterious enemy vessel that had appeared in their system. Captain Turner stood calmly, on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the approaching missile on the main view screen. The weapon was impressive by galactic standards, carrying enough destructive power to level continents and boil oceans. But to her crew, it was just another threat to be neutralized with minimal effort. Engineer Ben Parker activated the ship's defensive systems with the press of a single button. The quantum reactor fed power to the shield generators, creating a barrier of energy that surrounded the human vessel like an invisible shell. The defensive field was based on principles that the Krellians had never encountered, using forces that their science could not understand. The planet-killer missile struck the Defiance's shields and simply vanished. The antimatter warhead that should have destroyed a world was absorbed by the defensive field and converted into harmless energy. There was no explosion, no shockwave, no debris. The weapon that represented the pinnacle of Krellian military technology had been neutralized as easily as swatting a fly. The silence that followed was deafening. Every ship in the Krellian fleet had seen their ultimate weapon disappear without effect, leaving the human vessel completely undamaged. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Crews that had been preparing for battle now stared at their instruments in disbelief. Admiral Vextar felt his world collapse around him as he watched the impossible happen. The weapon that could destroy planets had been stopped by an enemy they did not understand. His tactical officers reported that their sensors had detected no energy discharge from the human ship. No sign that it had even noticed the attack. Emperor Thakran received the report in his palace, his clawed hands crushing the communication device as he listened to the news. The planet-killer missile had failed completely, leaving the alien vessel undamaged and their entire fleet demoralized. The weapon he had counted on to save his empire had proven useless against human technology. Captain Turner decided it was time to demonstrate why humans were called the children of a death world. She had hoped to resolve this situation peacefully, but the aliens had forced her hand by using their most powerful weapon. Now they would learn what happened when you threatened humanity. She turned to weapons officer Chris Johnson and gave him a simple order. Fire one warning shot at the uninhabited moon in the outer system. Make sure every ship in the Krellian fleet could see what human weapons could do when they were serious about fighting. The main cannon of the Defiance charged with a low humming sound that could be felt throughout the ship. The weapon was based on principles that pushed the boundaries of physics, focusing enough energy to ignite stars into a beam that could travel across solar systems. It was a weapon designed to fight enemies that humanity had not yet met. The beam, fired with no visible flash or explosion, simply reaching out across the void to touch the distant moon. The celestial body that had orbited the Krellian homeworld for millions of years was instantly vaporized, turned into a cloud of glowing particles that expanded outward from where it had been. The demonstration was visible to every ship in the system and every person on the planet below. The moon that had been part of their night sky since the beginning of recorded history was gone, erased from existence by a single shot from the human vessel. The psychological impact was beyond measurement. Communications officer Sam Martinez intercepted the alien transmissions that flooded the airwaves after the demonstration. The Krellian fleet was in complete panic, with ships breaking formation and fleeing in all directions. The disciplined military force that had gathered to defend their homeworld was collapsing into chaos. Navigator Julie Adams tracked the retreating alien vessels as they scattered across the star system. The Krellians were abandoning their defensive positions and running for the outer planets, their morale completely shattered by the display of human power. The Empire's military was falling apart before their eyes. Science officer Dr. Alex Stone monitored the communications networks across Krellian space, watching as news of the demonstration spread to every corner of their empire. The aliens were not just retreating from this system, they were pulling back from forward positions across dozens of star systems. The single shot had done more than destroy a moon. It had shattered the confidence of an entire civilization and begun the collapse of an empire that had ruled this part of the galaxy for centuries. The Krellians now understood that they were facing something far beyond their ability to fight. Emperor Thakran sat on his throne in stunned silence as reports flooded in from across his empire. The single demonstration of human power had triggered rebellions on 17 worlds, with conquered species declaring their independence and driving out Krellian forces. The empire he had spent his life building was crumbling faster than he could comprehend. Grand Admiral Zethak stood before the emperor with his head bowed in shame. Half of their fleet had deserted their posts and fled to the outer territories, while the other half was requesting permission to surrender. The military that had once struck fear into the hearts of a dozen species was now broken and demoralized. The Emperor's communication console chimed with an incoming message from the human vessel. The translation was clear and simple, offering terms that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. The humans demanded the immediate release of all prisoners, full access to Krellian prison records, and the complete withdrawal of all military forces from human space. Admiral Vextar transmitted the surrender message with trembling hands, his voice breaking as he spoke the words that would end his career and possibly his life. He offered complete capitulation to the human vessel, promising to cooperate fully with any demands they might make. The proud warrior who had conquered worlds was now begging for mercy. Captain Turner received the surrender with mixed feelings. Part of her was relieved that the bloodshed had been avoided, but another part was angry about the years of suffering that the Krellians had inflicted on human colonists. She accepted the surrender but made it clear that there would be consequences for the crimes that had been committed. The Defiance moved toward the prison world of Zareth Prime, where intelligence reports suggested that most of the human prisoners were being held. The massive battleship's approach caused panic among the prison guards, who had already heard about the destruction of the moon and the collapse of their military. Dr. Kate Sullivan prepared her medical team for the largest rescue operation in human history. The report suggested that hundreds of prisoners were being held in conditions that would require immediate medical attention. She had ordered additional supplies and equipment to be prepared for the worst possible scenarios. Security Chief Tony Rodriguez coordinated with the increasingly desperate Krellian authorities as they prepared to hand over control of the prison facilities. The alien guards were eager to cooperate, knowing that their empire's survival now depended on human mercy. They provided detailed maps and access codes without being asked. The rescue operation began as soon as the Defiance reached orbit around Zareth Prime. The human crew used their advanced transporters to beam directly into the prison facilities, bypassing the security systems that had kept the colonists trapped for years. The sight of human uniforms brought tears to the eyes of prisoners who had given up hope. Engineer Ben Parker supervised the technical aspects of the rescue, using the ship's advanced scanners to locate every human life sign on the planet. The quantum reactor provided unlimited power for the transporters, allowing them to move hundreds of people quickly and safely to the medical bays. The freed prisoners told horrifying stories of their captivity. Some had been held for decades, forced to work in dangerous mining operations that killed many of their fellow humans. Others had been used as test subjects for alien medical experiments or kept as trophies by wealthy Krellian nobles. Communications Officer Sam Martinez intercepted messages from across the galaxy as news of the human rescue spread. Species that had been conquered by the Krellians were rising up against their oppressors, inspired by the example of the single human ship that had brought down an empire. The galactic balance of power was shifting dramatically. Lieutenant Amy Collins monitored the collapse of Krellian authority as their military commanders abandoned their posts and fled to neutral space. The empire that had ruled through fear and intimidation was discovering that their subjects no longer feared them. Rebellions were breaking out faster than they could be counted. Navigation Officer Julie Adams plotted courses to other prison worlds mentioned in the Krellian records. The rescue mission had expanded beyond anything they had originally planned, but they were the only human ship in this part of the galaxy. Every colonist would be brought home, no matter how long it took. Science Officer Dr. Alex Stone analyzed the intelligence data they had gathered about other alien civilizations in the region. The news of humanity's arrival was spreading through diplomatic channels, and several species were already sending messages requesting contact with the new galactic power. Weapons. Officer Chris Johnson stood down from combat alert as the last of the Krellian ships fled the system. The demonstration of human power had been so effective that no further violence would be necessary. The Empire had surrendered completely, and their subjects were free to choose their own destinies. Captain Turner stood on the bridge as the Defiance prepared to depart for Earth, carrying the rescued colonists and detailed intelligence about the crimes committed against humanity. Behind them, the galaxy was transforming as news of the human battleship spread to every corner of known space. The age of human expansion had begun, and the universe would never be the same again.